Good afternoon. This was supposed to have started before now, and Mark, we appreciate you sticking around. I would like to welcome today's witness, Mr. Mark Greenblatt, to the subcommittee. Today, we are beginning an opportunity to hold an oversight of the Council of the Inspector Generals on Integrity and Efficiency. And today's hearing is a bipartisan hearing that will take place where we are looking forward to not only working with our witness today, but also examining the role that Congress has provided for SIGI to exist. So without objection, as I move forward, we want to wave on Congresswoman Harriet Hagman, Glenn Grothman, Barry Loudermilk, and Chip Roy. And all of these will be waved on the committee for the purpose of questioning witnesses today. Does the gentleman have anybody that you would like to add to that list?
I don't have anybody, and I don't have any objection.
Thank you very much. In addition to his duties as Inspector General for the Department of Interior, Mr. Greenblatt serves as the current chairman of the Council on Inspector Generals on Integrity and Efficiency. This is known as SIGI. SIGI's mission is to address integrity, economic, and effectiveness issues that transcend individual government agencies, help increase professionalism and efficiency and effectiveness by personnel by developing policies, standards, and approaches as they appear to aid in the establishment of a well-trained and highly skilled workforce in the offices of Inspector General across the government. Today's hearing will provide members with an opportunity to examine SIGI's legislative priorities, receive an update on the day-to-day operations, and better understand its internal processes. However, I need to also admit, as Mr. Greenblatt and I met yesterday, the elephant in the room seems to be the expectation of an upcoming Integrity Committee report on the investigation of the current Inspector General of the Department of Homeland Security. So, Mr. Greenblatt and I did speak yesterday, and we discussed how he is not able to address this issue or really questions regarding the substance of this report until it has been released to the public. We believe that that is a minimum of 1 month from now. That process that's being worked through is an open process, so to speak, in that it's allowing feedback to be given to members of that committee who will then make recommendations. Nonetheless, it's a good opportunity, Mr. Greenblatt, to have you before us to explain why members should have confidence in the Integrity Committee's work. But that comes from knowing more about how we see it and you see it, and coming to some, what I think is a closer recognition of the intent of Congress, not only at the time Congress gave this authority and responsibility, but its ongoing responsibility of our oversight. Aside from the pending investigation that is before this SIGI group, there have been instances in which ISA reports preceded the removal of Inspector Generals. These include things that have done before, and so we're going to make sure that we have a clearer understanding about that process. As I said to Mr. Greenblatt yesterday, I think it's important that we understand that for people to want to have this job, to serve as Inspector Generals, and to get the kind of people that you believe and I believe and any administration would believe that they would want highly qualified and people who would work within a structure that is well understood. So that there are 3 Inspector Generals gone in a 6-month period of time does not lend itself to the stability that I believe is effectiveness for not just Congress, but also for people who serve in that position. So add to it the most recent semi-annual report from the ICs, which states that it has received 1,755 incoming communications, resulting in 75 cases for IC's formal disposition, and that is that 6 investigations are pending completion, which means that it's a lot of work It's a big bucket, and it's upon each of you to deal with that. So we want to know what's going on in the IG community. We want to hear from you. We had a very cordial conversation yesterday. However, we understand that whistleblower complaints are a part of the frustrations that not only take place within the agencies at the IG, but the IGs have to deal with that in their own work performance. Perhaps more importantly is how can we have the confidence that the work of the Inspector Generals will not be negatively impacted if they assume that their own staff is using this same process to hinder the people that are expected to perform. So we want to know a little bit more about the recourse that an Inspector General might have if they believe that this process is happening to them. Either way, we believe it's something that's being dealt with that we think is problematic. We think it's problematic for the Inspector Generals. We think it's problematic for SIGI, and that means that people come to members of Congress and want to receive some bit of information back to make sure we're aware of the reality that exists in the community. As a member of this Oversight Committee, I assure you that Mr. Glenn Bratt, and I told him this, that we would be open to hearing. We'd be open to hearing on a bipartisan basis. We'd be interested in delving further and really began what I think is a discussion about each other, hearing from each other about the substance of your performance, the substance of our expectation, but the substance of fixing the problems. We believe we ought to go from fight to fix. And if we're a part of that problem, we need to face up to that, and we're going to agree to do that. So the things which we have talked about at the table can all be said here. Every single bit of it. There was no conversation yesterday that would not be pertinent today, except the belief that you have agreed to come back and us begin that discussion mid-September as necessary. So now I want to recognize the distinguished gentleman from Maryland, the ranking member, Mr. Mpume.
Mr. Chairman, thank you again for your important leadership on this, as in a bipartisan way we continue to do hearing after hearing in search of facts. Mr. Greenblatt, my welcome to you. An important role of this subcommittee is to see the effective, efficient, and fair functioning of the executive branch. The 74 Inspector Generals across the federal government are essential, obviously, to that effort, which is why we've called this hearing today, both the chairman and myself. And Inspector Generals operated, as you know, for 2 centuries in our military before Congress extended the concept to civilian agencies with the Inspector General Act of 1978. This act initially established 12 Inspector Generals across various departments and offices, and in their creation, the Congress at the time was careful to emphasize the apolitical and nonpartisan nature of Inspectors General. On a bipartisan basis, Congress designed these positions to focus on eliminating waste, fraud, and abuse, to encourage efficient agency operations, and to tackle wrongdoing without regard to partisanship or politics, for that matter. In 2008, in an effort to ensure robust oversight of Inspectors General, Congress passed the Inspector General's Reform Act with near unanimous bipartisan support. That bill established the Council of the Inspector Generals on Integrity and Efficiency, commonly known as SIGI. The Council on the Inspector Generals on Integrity and Efficiency, as the name implies, is made up of 74 Inspector Generals, including those appointed by the President with the advice and consent of the United States Senate. Those appointed by their agency heads, and one other IG, the Special Inspector General for Afghanistan Reconstruction, appointed by the President alone. SIGI was formed, I think it's fair to say, with the laudable goal of professionalizing the IG community so they could better address government-wide integrity, economy, and effectiveness issues. They do so, as we know, by training staff, by proposing legislation, and by recommending new inspector generals for vacant positions as they occur. Perhaps most importantly, SIGI holds inspector generals themselves accountable through the Integrity Committee. As a part of SIGI's various duties as a watchdog organization, one of which is to ensure regular reports to the Congress, as well as to issue reports on the result of their investigations into allegations of IG misconduct. Unfortunately, members of Congress on both sides of the aisle, myself included, have oftentimes found ourselves vexed by SIGI's lack of expediency in completing and disclosing the results of their Integrity Committee investigations. For example, since early 2022, members of Congress have raised to SIGI several concerns regarding the ethics, credibility, and the political independence of the Department of Homeland Security Inspector General Joseph V. Kafari, originally nominated by former President Trump in 2019. Alarmingly, these concerns included a failure to report rampant sexual misconduct and harassment charges at DHS and a failure to investigate and disclose missing Secret Service texts relating to the events of January 26, 2021. 3 years into his tenure, a majority of the lawyers in the DHS Office of the Inspector General had left, many of whom cited dysfunction and abuses of power stemming from Mr. Kafari's leadership as a catalyst, they said, for their departure. Most concerning, though, is Mr. Kafari's failure to comply with the House Oversight Committee's long-standing investigation into his misconduct, citing a myriad of spurious claims in response to numerous oversight letters. Over the course of his tenure, at least 8 investigative letters had been sent to IG Kafari over his inadequate performance and his unwillingness to cooperate with congressional investigations. Mr. Chair, I ask unanimous consent to submit several of those letters sent between 2020 and 2024, I should say, as well as 2 of Mr. Kafari's responses sent on February 1st and August 31st of 2023 into the record.
Without objection, those will be included.
Despite these mounting issues, we still lack a clear understanding of the status of the results of SIGI's investigation into IG Kafari, even after a years-long process, and I might add a highly suspect $1 million plus settlement between Mr. Kafari and one of his employees. And so I guess my point here is that if SIGI is to be an effective watchdog, it must be transparent to Congress and to its members on both sides of the political aisle. I do want to applaud the steps SIGI has taken recently to implement a new transparency policy, but I would hasten to say that much more is needed and would be openly embraced by this committee and indeed the larger Committee of Oversight. And while the Council must be improved, that does not mean it is replaceable, and it certainly does not mean it is expendable. Along with its oversight function, SIGI plays a valuable role in training staff, proposing congressional measures to improve government efficiency, and offering itself as a forum for learning best practices. The Council, as we know it, cannot and must not be recreated under the auspices of another agency, and I think, sir, you would agree with that. The Council of Inspectors General on Integrity and Efficiency has achieved important results. For example, after the CARES Act vested SIGI with oversight responsibilities of pandemic spending, it stood up the Pandemic Response Accountability Committee, also known as PRAC. That committee coordinates the efforts of 20 Inspector Generals to promote transparency and conduct data-driven oversight of the $5 trillion that the Congress invested in the nation to address the COVID-19 pandemic response. But ultimately, SIGI cannot carry out its work and its mission if it does not remain absolutely independent, especially independent from political pressure. If oversight of the inspectors general moved under the purview of any other department, in my opinion, or to any of the agencies headed by political appointees, the independence of IGs could be permanently undermined. We've already seen presidential administrations in years gone by fire inspectors general that release reports or engage in audits or carry out investigations that they themselves might find politically inconvenient, thereby undermining the independence of IGs would empower future presidents to aim to thwart oversight and abuse of their powers to do so as well. And so the chairman used the term conversation. I would borrow that and say today's conversation really gives us an opportunity to learn more about how we can improve the council, to look at where it may have erred in the past, to hear ideas about how to reform it into an even stronger organization. But it is also an opportunity to appreciate the ability of independent oversight to make our nation better. Respect for the rule of law and a culture of accountability are the bread and butter of this subcommittee, and I would dare say of the entire Congress. So like the chairman, I look forward to doing our part in this hearing. I thank you again for being here, and we are all working to preserve the values and the expectations that I spoke about earlier. Mr. Chairman, again, thank you for agreeing to do this and for allowing me the opportunity as the ranking member to participate, and I would yield back my time, sir.
Gentleman yields back his time. Thank you very much. I want to make sure Mr. Greenblatt understands that I think I have expressed, but that our ranking member has so adequately done so in his own representation, and that is we come to the table today with the chairman, Mr. Comer, the ranking member, Mr. Raskin, Mr. Mfume, and I, and we see a responsibility that we have also. And first of all, that we try and see things with an understanding that I don't try and decide what their answer and be, and they don't decide my answer, but some common sense that's involved is apparent that it can make us better. We think you do the same as IGs, and that's really the flavor that we want to talk about is decision-making, roles, and how we can work together. So, today we're joined by another orange tie that appeared today, the gentleman from Virginia. Jerry, you look good. I like that tie.
Thank you very much, but it's always a risk, Mr. Chairman, for an Irish Catholic to wear orange.
Well, then you're on your own. My wife would probably warn me that too. Today we're joined by Inspector General Mark Greenblatt, who currently serves as chair of the Council of the Inspector Generals on Integrity and Efficiency, known as SIGI. Mr. Greenblatt also serves as the Inspector General of the Department of Interior. Mr. Greenblatt has been in Federal Oversight Committee since 2003 as part of the legislative and executive branches. Before coming to DOI, Department of Interior Inspector General, he served as the Executive Director of SIGI, an organization that has been formed by Congress. He previously held leadership roles at the U.S. Department of Commerce, Office of Inspector General, U.S. Senate Permanent Subcommittee on Investigations. Mr. Greenblatt's also served as investigative counsel at the U.S. Department of Justice, OIG, and over the course of his federal career, he served and received numerous awards, including SIGI Award for Excellence, U.S. Department of Commerce Gold Medal and Bronze Medals, and the U.S. Department of Justice OIG Distinguished Service Award. We are delighted that you are here today, sir, and I think that this will probably match exactly with why you thought you were here to help us work together. Pursuant to Committee Rule 9G, the witness will please stand and raise your right hand for the oath to the witness. I would ask, do you solemnly swear or affirm that the testimony you're about to give is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God? Let the record reflect that the gentleman, Mr. Greenblatt, has answered in the affirmative. Gentleman may take his seat. We are delighted that you are here. We apologize once again for our delay, and let me remind the witness that we have read your written statement, and it appears in the record. I told you yesterday that I do not necessarily want to hold you to the 5-minute rule, nor our members. I think we're here for a bigger purpose, and that purpose is to get the things out, the questions answered, and the responses that would be necessary for us to move forward. So you've been doing this before. You know our red light, green light, yellow light process, and I would now recognize the distinguished gentleman, Mr. Greenblatt, for his opening statement. The gentleman is recognized.
Chairman Sessions, Ranking Member Mfume, members of the subcommittee, thank you for inviting me to testify here today on behalf of the Council of Inspectors General, which, as you said, we lovingly call SIGI. SIGI has a great story to tell, and I'm honored to share that story on behalf of the 14,000 hardworking public servants at the 73 federal offices of Inspector General who make up the IG community. It's worth emphasizing that the IG community and this committee share a common mission. We are all responsible for overseeing the federal government to make sure it delivers for the American people. IGs are like taxpayers' representatives inside federal agencies, tasked with protecting taxpayer dollars and ensuring that agency officials are living up to their responsibilities. Like Congress, OIGs promote economy, efficiency, and effectiveness in government operations. We do this by detecting and preventing fraud, waste, abuse, and mismanagement through thousands of audits, inspections, evaluations, and investigations every year. You can see the IG community's effectiveness in our results. Over the last 10 years, OIG audits and inspections have recommended more effective uses for or questioned the spending of more than $550 billion in federal funds. OIG investigators have recovered $143 billion from fraudsters who are stealing our tax dollars. OIG investigations have led to more than 53,000 successful criminal prosecutions and more than 15,000 civil actions. OIG oversight has led to the suspension and debarment of just shy of 50,000 parties, which prevents them from doing business with the federal government and therefore prevents future losses of government dollars. OIG reports have led agencies to take more than 43,000 personnel actions against federal employees, including terminations and suspensions. Over the last decade, the OIG community has identified potential savings across the federal government, totaling $693 billion. In short, I think Congress should be proud that its investments in inspectors general has paid off. Now, while these numbers are certainly impressive, they don't tell the entire story. Our oversight has impact far beyond these big dollar figures. Behind these statistics are real stories, real lives, real improvements for the American people. Now, let me give you just a few examples. The Veterans Affairs OIG, their work has led to significant improvements in the prevention of veteran suicides. HHS OIG has conducted sweeping oversight of nursing homes across America that uncovered terrible conditions for some of our elderly Americans and is protecting many others from similar abuses. The Transportation OIG has played a critical role in investigating criminal conduct that contributed to the crashes of 2 737 MAX jets and in auditing FAA's oversight of the safety of passenger aircraft and Boeing's processes for its aircraft certification. HUD OIG has uncovered awful sexual exploitation in our public housing system, which led to holding accountable a number of landlords who are sexual predators. In my own office at the Department of the Interior, we've initiated a series of inspections and evaluations specifically targeting waste, fraud, and abuse in Native American schools, all designed to help the most vulnerable people in our portfolio, Native American children. Now, these are just a handful of examples of the hard-hitting oversight occurring throughout the IG community. Indeed, from cybersecurity to cyber stalking, from depleted uranium to disaster preparedness, from Ukraine to Afghanistan, IG oversight continues to make an important difference in every aspect of American life. Now, in closing, I'd like to thank the committee for your long-standing bipartisan support for IGs and the oversight work that we do. All 14,000 of us in the OIG community have chosen to serve the public and make our government work better. But we also look for ways to make our own operations work better. So we welcome today's conversation with all of you. All of you are primary stakeholders for us. We want to know your vision for the future of oversight. We want to know your oversight priorities. We want to know your concerns and how we can work together going forward. And this is the main purpose of my testimony today. We want you to be confident that SIGI and the OIG community are diligently pursuing the mission that we share with all of you, to protect taxpayer dollars and ensure that the federal government is delivering for the American people. We want you to see the enormous value that we provide in our fair, objective, and independent oversight. As I said at the outset, SIGI has a great story to tell, and I hope we can work together with all of you to continue that great story for years to come. Thank you.
Ms. Greenblatt, thank you very much for your opening statement. I would first go to the distinguished gentleman from Alabama, the chairman of the Republican Policy Committee. The distinguished gentleman, Mr. Palmer, is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. PACE is designed to look backwards to chase money that has already been paid. What I'd like to know, General Greenblatt, is during the pandemic, there was a massive amount of fraudulent spending, widely referred to as the greatest theft of taxpayer money in history. So has the PACE data center been effective in recovering any of that?
Yes, sir. I think many of those investigations related to the pandemic are certainly ongoing right now and are already delivering returns. The key, though, is what you said at the outset, the initial part of your question there, which is the prevention piece. And that's where we really are pushing for a data hub inside SIGI that will allow us to be affirmatively preventing some of those bad dollars from going out the door.
That was actually my follow-up, was is this forward-looking? And one of the things I've spent a ton of time working with the GAO on improper payments and things like that, and I think we're far better off if we're in a preventive mode than we are in trying to recover what's gone out. But I just wonder if we've done all these audits on federal agencies, we've identified a number of problems. I get the GAO reports and it tells me what % of the recommendations have been implemented, and sometimes it's none of them. Have you experienced the same issues with audits done by the Inspector Generals that never really get acted on, the recommendations never get implemented?
I think some agencies are better than others. I think some of the relationships between the IGs are better than others. And so I think it's a bit of a hodgepodge. Some of them are pretty good about implementing, but some of them are absolutely terrible about it. And so I think the key is two things. One is transparency, and so what we are doing at SIGI is trying to make our open recommendations even more prominent on oversight.gov, which is our primary outward-facing website, so that you all can see them. And then the other part of that, part two of that, is frankly pressure from Congress. If you all see open recommendations that we've identified as significant, come talk to us and we can share with you what are the hot button items that we think the agency should be implementing. And then I think you're going to see product move, if you will.
That's part of the challenge for us, is that previous Congresses passed legislation to deal with improper payments, Improper Payments Reduction Act, and then there was a second version of that, but there was never any enforcement in it. And a number of us, including the Comptroller General, and I have talked about this, is how do you incentivize agencies to actually implement the changes that need to be made? And I would really be interested, and I think the committee would be very interested in hearing from SIGI about this, on how we can actually get some enforcement, for lack of a better word, but incentives, whatever it takes to reduce these improper payments and prevent them in the future. Would you be able to provide some recommendations?
Absolutely, sir. And the impact of congressional attention cannot be overstated. So if I could just share a quick story for you. In my office at the Department of the Interior, we had an audit that revealed that one of the components within Interior wasn't checking some of their contractors against the suspension and debarment list, right, which is where folks have identified problematic contractors and basically saying don't give contracts or grants to these folks. They weren't comparing those contractors against those lists. We made recommendations, and they said that some of those recommendations would take 2 years to implement. We engaged with Congress. Congress notified that they were going to have a hearing on that topic, and within 2 weeks, they implemented those very recommendations. So it went from 2 years to 2 weeks just on the letter from Congress. So I would recommend that there is a synergy here between our recommendations and congressional oversight that go well together and would address the very issues that you're talking about, sir.
Have you looked at the Treasury's do not pay system and determined how effective that is in preventing payments?
That would be the Treasury OIG that would do that. So I haven't done that, and frankly, I'd have to defer to them. I'd have to ask them, frankly.
But with this pay system, would you be able to integrate that with other databases like the do not pay system?
That would be the goal, I think, is that we would be able to match up these data sets and identify problematic recipients. For example, the PACE, which you identified, the Pandemic Analytics Center of Excellence, if they had been in existence in 2020 and they had matched up the data that we have now, they could have identified more than 70,000 bad Social Security numbers. So this is PPP loans going out the door with bad Social Security numbers or questionable Social Security numbers that amounted to more than $5 billion that we could have flagged for the SBA and said, wait, pump the brakes on those payments. Let's do another review of those.
See, that raises one of the concerns that I think we have on the committee is the amount of access that the Inspector Generals have to these other databases, the interoperability of our systems to catch things like that. And I'm hoping that's where you're heading with this, is that we have that interoperability, that we have the ability for the Inspectors General to have access to other existing databases like the do not pay system, some of these other things, so that we avoid making these payments.
Yes, sir. That's exactly the vision. Just like we showed you in that demonstration, a few days ago, we would love to bring all that together and make that very easily accessible to the IGs so that they could harvest that data and use it not just in the pay and chase, which you referenced a moment ago, but in the affirmative prevention of bad dollars going out the door. So we're in the prevention business, and so that's very much what we're interested in.
Well, I'm running over. The last thing that I would ask you is that I think all of us on the committee would be interested in any statutory authority changes that you think are necessary for that, and if you've got some ideas on that, we would like to hear them. On that, Mr. Chairman, I yield back.
Gentleman yields back his time. Thank you very much. We now go to the ranking member, Mr. Mfume. Gentleman's recognized.
Mr. Greenblatt, I think of you as the sheriff. In many respects, it's an unenviable position, but the bottom line, as most sheriffs will tell you, is to do the right thing day in and day out, which is why I talked about why the importance of this council means so much to the accountability that the American people expect for this Congress and indeed this subcommittee to oversee. Some of that accountability wore on me in the wrong way with a previous Inspector General who was let go not too long ago. I'm talking about Ms. Ennis at the Social Security Administration. The Social Security Administration sits right in the middle of my district, and I oftentimes hear quite a bit from employees there about current and lingering problems. And I can't begin to tell you how many complaints I got during her tenure about how people allege she was treating them. And, you know, there was a Washington Post story that ran on May 31st detailing, in many respects, her tenure there. And they titled it, "Embattled Social Security Watchdog to Resign After Tumultuous Tenure." I want to commend Siggy for doing the background work on that. I know that in Ms. Ennis's case, there was a previous, I guess I could use the term reprimand from Siggy, but as the council went more and more into the investigation, there were members of this body on both sides of the aisle who felt strongly that this was a case that warranted some sort of greater scrutiny. She had faced increasing performance problems in recent years, as you know. The number of completed audits dwindled. Dozens of senior auditors, investigators, and other staff quit or retired, many in frustration, in which they described to the Washington Post and other news sources as her mercurial leadership and lack of focus on the office's mission. So I raise that not to be critical of Siggy, but just the opposite, to say it's important for those kind of interventions. I began my remarks by saying that I thought that there could be more deliberate speed in some of this, and I guess some of that gets back to your ability to do what you have to do and whether or not you've got enough funding to do that. So I want to talk, if you would tell me a bit about your ideas of funding mechanisms that would increase your capacity and the ability of Siggy to take on issues like this and investigations like this and to conclude them much more rapidly.
Well, one of the problems that we run into with respect to the Integrity Committee is that it has no investigative staff. It has just a handful of lawyers and staff that help process complaints and sort of run the program, but they aren't investigators. The Integrity Committee has to go out and find OIGs who are not conflicted out to then go lead the investigations. And so I think having an appropriation specifically for inspectors, specifically for investigators for the Integrity Committee, a cadre of investigators that would sit inside Siggy that could do those investigations, it would streamline everything markedly. So I would say, in terms of funding, the budget, a dedicated appropriation for investigators in the Integrity Committee would undoubtedly help and move things along faster. So that's one thing. The other thing that I think is sort of an emerging idea for us is to tap into expiring, unobligated funds. So what happens is IGs, like my office, we always have to save a little bit just in case there are contracts that go over even after they're expired. This is all standard stuff in the federal government. And those are basically rounding errors, right? There's a very small pieces of amounts of money relative to our global budgets. If those, when they are expired, if those could be routed to Siggy, we could solve all of these problems quite quickly. And so that's one thing I would strongly encourage Congress to consider is the ability of shifting those expired, unobligated balances for OIGs to Siggy would give us the ability to remedy a lot of those problems, sir.
Yeah, I was hoping you would mention that. I mean, getting an appropriation is a direct way, and as you might imagine, it's not the easiest thing in the world sometimes. However, in the case where there have already been appropriated funds, and every member of this committee in this Congress knows what it's like, you've got to round out at the end of each year how much money is allocated to you. In our case, if we end of the year, we end with, let's just for a number, say $50,000. That money directly goes back to the Treasury. So I hear you loud and clear on this. It's a way of funding the expansion and the ability to investigate without appropriating new and additional funds. And I want to commit myself to being supportive of that, and I will seek to have a conversation with the chair as well. I mean, I just think it's a way that we're not appropriating new dollars, but we're taking what we've already appropriated and still spending them. even if we're not spending them in the same fiscal year. I've got a few other questions, but for the sake of some of my colleagues who are here and have not been heard with an opening statement or with questions, I'm going to yield back my time, Mr. Chairman. I would like to explore that, though, at some point with you in a bipartisan way to see if it's something we might be able to put forward.
I'm very open to that. Distinguished gentleman yields back his time, and now would yield to the distinguished gentleman from Arizona, the gentleman, Mr. Biggs.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you, Inspector General Greenblatt, for being here. The Inspector General Act authorizes SIGGI's Integrity Committee to investigate allegations of wrongdoing on the part of an IG or senior official within the office. How does the Integrity Committee define wrongdoing?
There are three main buckets that the Integrity Committee uses, and it's significant misconduct, like gross mismanagement. There's conduct unbecoming of an official in that position. I'm sorry, I'm butchering the language, but that's generally the nature of the allegations. It's not. It's got to be significant, if you will.
So that's interesting to me because the IG Act does not define wrongdoing in the relevant statute, and you've just used, as Mr. Greenblatt, I know you're an attorney, I'm an attorney. The definitions you used have what I would call massive holes and subjective interpretation to them. So when you say significant misconduct, what does significant mean? What does misconduct mean? It becomes tautological. And when you say conduct unbecoming, what does that mean? All of those things are incredibly subjective. And that's part of the problem with the IG Act in and of itself, and maybe that's something Congress should look at a little more thoroughly. The IG Act provides that the Integrity Committee must adopt policies and procedures necessary to ensure fairness and consistency in determining whether to initiate an investigation, conducting an investigation, and reporting on the results of an investigation. What standard does the IC use to evaluate complaints it receives?
It looks at whether it fits in one of those three buckets, and then evaluates whether they get thousands and thousands of complaints. Many of them
I know you get a lot of complaints. I'm looking. What's the standard that you use? You said we're going to look at those three buckets. Is the standard written down anywhere? You guys have that written down?
They have extensive policies and procedures.
Is it written down somewhere?
Yes, sir.
Okay, and is it statutory?
No, sir. It's implementing the statute.
Is it just as? And if you're going back to the three buckets again, when you come back to subjectiveness, you're coming back to some kind of, boy, that sure looks significant to me. What do you think? No, I don't think that looks significant. It's almost like the distinction that the Secret Service Director, former Secret Service Director, was trying to make yesterday between threat and suspicious. I mean, that's really part of the problem here. Without a clear written standard to evaluate complaints, how then is the IC living up to the statutory mandate that its procedures ensure fairness and consistency, keeping in mind that you and I as attorneys, and particularly in investigations, and I look to criminal law on this, everybody wants to know where the bright lines are. And I'm just having trouble seeing where the bright lines are here.
Frequently, sir, there aren't bright lines, but I would say that there are not bright lines in what we do every day as IGs. We have to make hard calls. We have to implement laws that are not expressly defining each and every specific element of every potential violation. We have to implement.
So what you're suggesting then is that Congress has failed to actually, and I don't disagree with this, by the way. Congress has failed to give very specific language that is, we put too many vague notions. We lead things to the agencies and departments, policies to determine how they're going to implement, et cetera. And the reality is a lot of that ends up being subjective. According to longstanding Supreme Court precedent, a prosecutor must disclose to a criminal defendant any evidence in the prosecutor's possession that would tend to exculpate the defendant. Is the IG or other covered person who is under investigation by the Integrity Committee entitled to exculpatory evidence in the Integrity Committee's possession?
I don't know the answer to that. I would say this is not a criminal proceeding. This is, you know, just like an IG investigation.
Right,
We try to get all.
I know it's not a criminal proceeding, but you are required to ensure fairness and consistency.
Absolutely,
And if you had exculpatory evidence and you chose to withhold it, would that be ensuring fairness?
I would not support that in any way, shape, or form. But I can guarantee you, the community doesn't do it, and the IC doesn't do it either.
But there's nothing there that requires them to provide exculpatory evidence. And when you're determining whether there was significant misconduct, maybe you're making decisions on that. I would suggest perhaps we have some work we need to do to clean up statutes, so that would be clear that exculpatory evidence would be provided. How many employees are typically dedicated to an investigation related to an inspector general or a covered employee?
By the Integrity Committee, I actually have no idea. I would imagine they're sizable teams depending on the size of the investigation. So a larger investigation would need an investigating team from the assisting IG to be.
And here we go again. And I'm not meaning to nitpick at you. I'm just trying to understand how this has gone, because I've been looking at this now for a couple of years, and I find it intriguing. So you just said, well, you know, if you got a larger investigation, again, that's going to be subjective, right? I mean, it is. It just is. You guys are, golly, you know, this is, and every time we go, we lift up a stone, we see something else. Maybe that's something else. Are these senior employees that you use here? I mean, you say you don't have enough investigators. That's what you said earlier.
Yeah, so I would imagine there are line-level investigators all the way up through attorneys, through senior folks who are overseeing them, ultimately to the IG, who's assisting the investigation of the Integrity Committee.
Well, according to open payrolls, in 2023, the average salary for all SIGI employees, and that, of course, is going to include front office staff, was just under $110,000, which is $52.70 an hour for a 40-hour work week. And that seems to be in line with GS 13, 14, 15, maybe, something like that, maybe a little behind 15.
But those are folks that are not doing the investigation. If that's SIGI employees, those are affirmatively not doing the investigation. So it's going to be folks who are.
So their salaries are going to be higher, right?
Could be. It depends.
You don't know?
I don't know, but the agents that carry badges and guns who do many of these investigations get extra pay because of LEAP, law enforcement pay, availability pay, which is extra. But I don't know if they're.
So I'm going to leave up because the ranking members made some allegations about a specific IG, which I found were untoward, and I've deliberately tried not to weigh in on that. Although I'm sure getting ready to weigh in on it if he wants to continue there. But I will say this: SIGI's current funding is a percentage of each IG's appropriation. Isn't that true?
For the most part, yes.
SIGI, can you take a vote then to increase that percentage at any time?
Yes, but I would face a mutiny by the SIGI members.
So
I committed when I first ran for chair to not increase that number absent some special circumstance.
You've indicated that you don't have enough investigators. That seems like a special circumstance. I'll yield back, Mr. Chairman.
Would the gentleman just yield for a second, please, before yielding back? So that the record is straight, I was not spewing my allegations against an IG. I was reading from a documented Washington Post story and reflecting on comments that have come into my congressional office from people who felt like they were not treated correctly by that person.
I'm talking about someone different. Mr. I'll reclaim so I can respond.
Sure, it's your time.
I was not referring to your 5-minute comments, and when you're talking about the Social Security Administrator, I was talking about the DHS IG, which
Mr. Kafari.
yeah,
Yeah.
and if we're going to go there, then I'm ready to we can have that debate, but I'm not sure that this is the forum that the chairman wants to.
Yeah, I'm not trying to get a debate. I just thought I'd raise an issue that has been clearly in the press and elsewhere, and it ended when I finished my comments. Mr. Greenblatt didn't respond to it because I don't think there was a response that he can offer.
I would see if I can help out in this circumstance. factors that are surround this
Mr.
issue.
Chairman, I think your mic needs to be on.
My mic is on. I probably need to get a little bit closer, and I appreciate my orange tie friend helping me. The issue that is being discussed now, in fact, as I referred to it earlier, is an issue that is ongoing. And the request for Mr. Greenblatt to be here is about the larger issue about its authority, its responsibility, how it operates, and how it does things. In fact, as I stated earlier, subject to further information being available, that would be available, Mr. Greenblatt agreed to come to my office in the middle of September and affirmed to me that there would be no action taken by this organization until that time that he and I spoke.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. But if I may respond briefly.
Jim, I'd like to clear up anything that we've got here because I don't tend to pit anybody against anybody else in this. We're not trying to dance around it. We're trying to say that's not the purpose of today's hearing.
But
I will ask the gentleman in just a moment, please.
when the ranking member said there's a concern of failure to report rampant sex harassment, well, there's a mountain of information which indicates that those allegations occurred prior to his coming on board, and
Fair enough.
right, and so we can respond. I'm trying to respect the chairman's prerogative here, but
Would the gentleman allow for the words prior to his coming on board to be inserted there?
yeah, I mean that's fine.
Yeah.
I'm just trying to say, look, if we're really not going to get into that issue today, I didn't bring it up, and I purposely didn't bring it up, and I asked questions what I thought were process questions, and yet the opening statement of the ranking member actually
And you know
brought
what,
this forward.
I respect your viewpoint. Does the gentleman wish to make that statement, that there was this statement made and should be clarified a bit, and did you just do that?
Well, I thought I just did.
that's fine
The
for me.
gentleman, this has become an issue that's taken on its own life. And that's why I said Mr. Greenblatt didn't respond, I didn't pursue. And if those comments or accusations came before the gentleman in question became an IG, I'm fine with that. The record should reflect that.
Then
The
we'll-
timeline.
We'll try and leave it there.
Yeah.
And then we'll get into it as we decide in another hearing.
Absolutely.
I respect that. The gentleman from Virginia, did you wish to offer?
I just wanted a question to you, Mr. Chairman.
Yes, sir.
Did I understand you to say you have an understanding with Mr. Greenblatt, wearing his hat as chairman of SIGI, to withhold action?
None
on an-
whatsoever.
Okay, I just,
I will offer a clarification.
Yeah, thank you.
And I said this to Mr. Mfume, that Mr. Greenblatt has told me. I told him that's not what this hearing's about today. But I did say it's on our minds. And by being on our minds, Mr. Greenblatt said, look, there is a process that is going on, including allowing feedback that will take place on or about August the 2nd. And that is when people would be responding back, and that would need to be filtered and discussed by any number of members that might be in a decision-making mode. And he did not believe that would take place for some period of time. And I said, might that period of time be after the middle of September? He said, quite likely.
okay.
And I will agree to come and sit down with you as I know more. And I told Mr. Mfume, as we were sitting here today, part of the discussion we had, I would include him in. Is
And-
that correct?
And Mr. Chairman, just to make,
Yes.
thank you for your clarification. I saw Mr. Greenblatt wag his head. I just want to, if it's all right, I want to just make sure, Mr. Greenblatt,
If the-
that's your understanding as well.
If the gentleman
Of course.
will be recognized in a minute.
Well,
The gentleman will be recognized in a minute. Mr. Greenblatt, I told you, as you willingly engaged properly in this debate, did I overemphasize or correctly state what you might want to, what you and I agreed to?
Yes, sir. That latter formulation was correct. That is all my expectation. I should just be very clear. I am not on the Integrity Committee. I do not vote. I am not in the briefings. I am not in the meetings. Right?
But
So I
you're
can't
aware of
control
the
them.
process.
But I can be aware of the process, and my sense is that it would take some time to review the responses, if any. To review them, it takes time. I'm just talking about my own experience as IG. It takes time to incorporate, to ingest what the subjects are saying, review it, give it a fair read, especially in something that's a large endeavor. It can take some time. So my expectation to you, which you correctly
That's correct.
identified, is that I just don't think it would be for a little while.
And with that understanding, he agreed to come back.
Correct.
In the middle of September, whether or not they had gotten close or not.
Correct. And
So
this is
we're
part of-
not tying each other down, but I did include Mr. Mfume in that discussion. You're entitled to do that.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you very much. The gentleman has yielded this time. The gentlewoman, Ms. Norton, is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. A major component of the Council of Inspectors General on Integrity and Efficiency's mission is to, and I'm quoting here, increase the professionalism and effectiveness of personnel by developing policies, standards, and approaches to aid in the establishment of a well-trained and highly skilled workforce in the offices of the Inspector General, end quote. CIGI's success is essential because agencies and their stakeholders rely on the Inspector General community to improve agency operations and root out waste and fraud. Mr. Greenblatt, I know you have mentioned this in your testimony, but can you tell me once again how many students CIGI's Training Institute enrolled in fiscal year 2023?
It was more than 12,000 students in the OIG community, and that includes auditors, investigators, inspectors, evaluators, attorneys, every type of, and including also senior leadership. So it's a wide variety of different training offerings that we provide.
Well, Mr. Greenblatt, how many students has CIGI enrolled in fiscal year 2024 programming so far?
I don't know the number off the top of my head, but it's easily on track to match the 12,000 from last year. We are, we're packing the house in terms of our offerings. They are very, very popular, and our biggest problem is actually trying to accommodate more.
I appreciate that answer. When the number becomes clear, I wish you would report that to the chairman.
Certainly.
Our Republican Senate colleague, Chuck Grassley, very recently reminded us, and here I'm quoting, OIGs are the independent watchdogs protecting Americans' taxpayer dollars and fighting waste, fraud, and abuse in the executive branch. Their efficiency depends on their objectivity, end quote. Among CIGI's essential roles is development of quality standards for the fundamental skills of the Inspector General community. For example, quality standards for investigations, for digital forensics, and for inspections and evaluations. So Mr. Greenblatt, why are these quality standards critical to maintaining a professionalized and competent Inspector General community?
That gets to the core of what we do and how we add value as an organization. So these are the standards that all of our member IGs have to live up to. So we have audit standards, as you mentioned, we have inspections and evaluation standards, we have investigation standards, and we have peer reviews where we look at each other's work. And it's like a, like a root canal. It's going to the dentist. It's not a fun or pleasant experience. And we look to make sure that the other folks, that the other organization is actually living up to the standards that we've laid out. We look at their cases. We look at their audits. We look at their investigations, their inspections and evaluations in detail and say, are you living up to every single principle in the quality standards for each of those disciplines? And that is a great service that we provide, these peer reviews, because they can give you all assurance that the work is high quality, that it is nonpartisan, that it is independent, that it is fair, that it is objective. All of those things are critical parts of what we do, that they're thorough, exhaustive, and factual in nature. So that's a critical component of our portfolio.
Well, Mr. Greenblatt, how does CIGI develop these quality standards to ensure the community will adopt and follow them?
So periodically, the respective committees, so for example, the Investigations Committee or the Audit Committee, will look at their existing quality standards and update them to see whatever current practices are at play. For audits, it's a little bit different because it follows what's called the Yellow Book, which is promulgated by GAO. So GAO issues the Yellow Book, and then we update our standards to match or exceed that. The Blue Book, which is what we do for inspections and evaluations, is determined by the Inspections and Evaluations Committee, and it's a huge, long process involving dozens of people throughout throughout the IG community, and then we vote on it as a community, and then we also use that as the standard to review each other's work. So this is a big, heavy process, if you will, that includes a lot of voices, and it's quite robust, actually, and those are, I'm happy to share those quality standards on all of those disciplines for you, because yeah, I think you'll be quite comfortable that they're exhaustive and give you confidence in what we're doing.
Well, I appreciate your sharing those standards, and I yield back, Mr. Chairman.
Gentleman yields back time. Distinguished gentleman from Kentucky, the young chairman of the committee, is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you for convening this very important hearing. If Congress were to move the PACE into SIGI, what other agencies would SIGI work with to utilize these capabilities to prevent improper payments, not just pay and chase? For instance, how would you coordinate with the financial integrity systems at the U.S. Treasury, such as Do Not Pay?
We've already met with the Assistant Secretary there, specifically to discuss that very potential. I think it should be inside SIGI. Currently, the PRAC is inside SIGI, so it's sort of technically inside SIGI now. The expansion, we believe, should be inside SIGI as well, but we would work with anyone and everyone on that.
One of the most significant concerns with any government-wide data analytics platform is security data, which any expansion of the PACE would create. SIGI has never overseen the protection of data on that scale. Why should Congress trust SIGI is the best positioned to protect the data?
Well, we're doing it now with the PACE, frankly, and I think we have the capability to do it on a grander scale. These are systems that many IGs already have access to individually. So what this would do is, I think, make it more efficient by making it in one central spot that the other IGs can go to.
Let's shift gears now. What due process protections exist for a subject of an IC investigation?
Many. In fact, I think it's got far more than the vast majority of investigations.
So is there any recourse in the courts for an individual who believes their due process rights have been violated by the IC?
I don't know the answer to that question. I would leave that to the courts.
We need the answer to that question, if you can.
Yes, sir.
Each month, the committee receives a notification of every investigation that has gone beyond the 30-day and 150-day period. Most recently, this includes 6 investigations, which has surpassed the 150-day period, 4 of which are from 2022 or earlier. Is it acceptable to have investigations open for 2, 3, or even 4 years?
No, sir. That is a massive problem for us, but I would say that it takes two to tango on an investigation. It could be slow investigators, but it also could be subjects that refuse to turn over materials.
I completely understand and agree with that.
Right. I mean, Congress knows both parties in both directions for years, has dealt with these very similar types of issues. So it takes two to tango. And so I would say the number, the Integrity Committee over the years has had some large and investigations that take a long time. And a consistent theme through many of them is OIGs that are not cooperating with the investigation. And frankly, if agency heads did the same thing as some of these IGs, and we reported that to Congress, you all, I hope, on a bipartisan basis, would be howling mad.
Well, don't get me started on that. We've requested a lot of your information. We know, I'm sure it's already been discussed. There are several, especially when you talk about cigar and that, there's lots of IGs that aren't getting information from this administration. This administration's doing everything it can to prevent certain IGs from doing their job. But what I'm asking about, if an IG is engaged in wrongdoing, then SIGI and the IC need to provide it to Congress in an expedited way. We should not have IGs who have engaged in wrongdoing still in office. But if an IG has not engaged in wrongdoing, SIGI and the IC need to close those investigations now. We should not have an opaque investigation tainting an IG office's work product for 4 years. Wouldn't you agree?
I would absolutely agree with you, sir. And I would note that, Mr. Connolly, I think under your leadership, recently in the last Congress, we pushed through what's called a 7-day letter. Congress pushed through what's called a 7-day letter, which gives the Integrity Committee the ability to act faster in those very situations, sir.
So what are you doing to ensure the IC gets these investigations done in a timely manner?
Again, I think we need mechanisms to ensure that IGs are cooperating with IC investigations. They would move much, much faster. That is a consistent theme with the slower investigations. And it is...
Well, and I'll conclude with this, my time's expired, but we need more cooperation from you all. We need more communication because we depend on the IGs. To have successful oversight, we have to have a great working relationship and trust and confidence in the IGs. And when there's a breakdown of communication with the IGs, or when there's a suspicion of wrongdoing or mistrust with the IGs, or with the SIGI, I mean, that's a problem for oversight. So, Mr. Chairman, again, thank you for this hearing, and I yield back.
Distinguished gentleman, I'm going to come to you, sir.
Yes, sir.
Distinguished gentleman yields back his time. Distinguished gentleman from Virginia, Mr. Connolly, is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and I'm so glad you're having this hearing. SIGI has been a very great focus of mine when I chaired this committee, subcommittee, and I'm so glad you're having this hearing. Mr. Comer, I agree with everything he just said at the end, everything. For us to do our job and for the public to have confidence, the IG, two things. IGs have to be purer than driven snow. And that ought to be bipartisan. When we find wrongdoing, it ought to be investigated by SIGI and it ought to be acted upon expeditiously so that we can restore credibility and integrity. But the second is you've got to have independence. There can't be retribution because you're doing your job. I'm not aware of a single IG being removed out of retribution by the Biden administration. Are you, Mr. Greenblatt?
No, sir.
So, with respect to that, did you know an IG with the Intelligence Committee community named Michael Atkinson?
I do know.
And what happened to Mr. Atkinson?
He was removed from...
Why was he removed?
You'll have to refer to the president.
He was removed because he actually alerted Congress to the whistleblower report about the infamous phone call between President Trump and President Zelensky. Are you familiar with an IG at Health and Human Services named Christy Grimm?
Yes, sir.
And what happened to her?
She is she is the IG at HHS right now.
But she was also replaced, was she not, as acting IG because she released a report that there were severe shortages at hospitals combating coronavirus?
No, she was acting and then later confirmed under President Biden.
Yes, but she was not confirmed under President Trump.
President Trump hadn't nominated her at that point. She was an acting.
She was replaced as acting. He found a different IG.
I don't believe that was the case. I do think he was asked a question about that report in a press conference and made some comments, perhaps, about her.
What about Steve Linick? Did you know Steve Linick?
Yes, sir.
And who was he?
He was the IG at the State Department.
At the State Department. What happened to him?
He was removed from office, sir.
He was removed. Why was he removed?
Again, you'll have to refer to the president's.
He was removed because he was investigating Secretary of State Pompeo. And he investigating accusations, not proved, about the misuse of government resources. So when we talk about removing IGs, maybe there's a reason to do it, but there ought to be a really good one, and it can't be because you're doing your job. If we do that in any administration, we compromise the integrity of the IG. Now, part two, integrity of IGs. And you were talking with the chairman a little while ago about two-way street, and we don't always get cooperation. And I think I want to expand on that. Did you know Laura Wertheimer?
Yes.
And she was the IG at FHFA, is that correct?
Yes, sir.
And she was being investigated, is that correct?
Correct.
And there were charges that she had fostered a, quote, a culture of witness intimidation through a pattern of staff abuse and the fear of retaliation, unquote. Is that correct?
I don't know the exact quote, but yes, that's the essence of it.
Trust me, here. I don't make up quotes. All right. And what did she do in terms of cooperation with an investigation into her management practices?
I believe that's laid out in the report, but my understanding is that was as bad a cooperation as you could possibly imagine.
Didn't she, in fact, actively say she wouldn't cooperate because she did not recognize the authority of the Integrity Committee?
I don't know about the exact quote again, but that does sound
right,
very close to what was the essence of it.
I was involved with another colleague on this committee a number of years ago actually filing a complaint against an IG. We had a whistleblower who talked about workplace abuse, not showing up for work, nepotism and favoritism, retaliation, drinking, and collusion with a particular group of people up here to actually define the scope of an investigation that had a profound impact in terms of news and lying about it where you're sitting. Now, let's assume someone's innocent until proven guilty, but I was personally involved in that complaint. And we filed it with Siggy. There were two of us, two members of this committee. And we never heard from Siggy until, I don't know, months later. And all we got was like a two-word sentence, a two-word report. We've looked at it and there's nothing there. Thank you very much. Have a good holiday. And that had a profound impact on our confidence, frankly, in Siggy's ability to examine serious allegations against about an IG. And again, assuming everyone's innocent, but there has to be a transparent process. And I would say the same if my friends on the other side of the aisle had somebody known as a Democrat who nonetheless engaged in that kind of behavior. I would want to get at the bottom of it, either to clear that person's name so that he or she could get on with their job, or to take action so that we can restore credibility to that office. why should, given our own, some of us, negative experience with SIGI's transparency and process or lack thereof, and I take note of the lack of resources. I think you should have resources, but help us feel more confident that as we move forward, SIGI has the ability and will and determination to self-police. Because if you can't self-police, sooner or later, we're going to do it for you. We're going to pass legislation that will take it out of your hands. And there have been enough incidents of IGs with questionable behavior, and that's being charitable in some cases, that it's troubling. And it can be troubling on both sides of the aisle, as I said. So have at it.
Well, sir, I appreciate your interest. I appreciate your support. I find, that your discomfort with the process to be heartbreaking. And we want you all, as I said in my opening statement, we want all of you to be very confident in what we're doing, both as IGs, but also in the Integrity Committee and everything else we're doing at SIGI. Let me assure you, I appointed or was involved in the appointment of all 4 IGs on the Integrity Committee. These are some of the hardest working, fairest, most sober-minded IGs in the business. These are serious people. They deliberate on these allegations and on these matters for hours. This is all done as a collateral duty. They have a job as an IG, and they spend extraordinary amounts of time specifically designed to getting the answer right. And I have great confidence in them. If I were under investigation, those are the 4 IGs I would want running it. So I hope I can give you some confidence that these are some of the very, very best we've got. And I would invite you, I actually want to set up, we are in the process of setting up like a meet and greet for all of you and your staff to interact with these folks. We can't talk about cases, but they can talk to you and just, you can get a sense of who they are. They can be 3-dimensional human beings. These are 4 of the best that we've got. And I would love for you to meet them. The best advertising we have for the Integrity Committee is the Integrity Committee. So I would love for you to meet them, lay eyes on them, talk with them. If we can make that happen, I think that would dispel a lot of the concern because I think you'll see they're good people who just want to get the right answer.
I thank the chair again for holding this hearing and look forward to working with him. I do think there's bipartisan ground to be had here, at least in focusing on process and structure that can help us ensure good outcomes. I thank the chair.
Thank you very much. The distinguished gentleman yields back his time. The gentlewoman from Wyoming, Ms. Hageman, is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Greenblatt, as allegations of politicization of SIGI continue, I am concerned about whether appropriate standards of due process are in place to ensure that IGs and employees of IG offices are not unfairly targeted for just doing their jobs. SIGI's Integrity Committee, or IC, investigates wrongdoing by IGs or their staff. Is that correct?
Yes.
And is it Kimberly A. Howell who is currently the chair of the IC?
Correct.
And Kimberly Howell is not an employee of the federal government, is she?
She is an IG of what's called a designated federal entity.
I get that. She is not an employee of the federal government, is she?
I don't believe so.
Okay. Can the president or anyone in the executive branch fire Ms. Howell or any head of the IC?
The president could remove remove the head of the CBP, where she is the Inspector General.
Okay, but the president does not interact with or fire the head of the IC, correct?
Well,
and you've already testified that you don't have any oversight, and you do not oversee Ms. Howell. Isn't that also correct?
I can remove them from the Integrity Committee.
Okay. Well, just over a month ago, the IC delivered a report to the President and Congress with findings of abuse of authority regarding the Social Security Administration's Inspector General. And Ms. Howell sent and signed this report to its recipients. Were you aware of that?
Yes, ma'am.
An IC report delivered to the president or an agency head then can recommend or result in disciplinary action against an IG or a person working inside an IG office, leading all the way up to termination. Is that correct?
It can recommend that, yes.
Okay, and doesn't that mean that the leadership of SIGI could use the IC to undo the presidential appointment and Senate confirmation of executive officials by individuals that were never nominated and which are actually not even federal employees?
No, I don't agree with that statement at all.
Okay. When the IC asks an IG or an employee of an IG office to respond to an allegation to avoid a full investigation, the respondent must fully refute the allegation such that no reasonable person would conclude that further development would demonstrate that the respondent committed the misconduct. In other words, when they come under investigation, they are the ones that carry the burden of proof with a very high standard for exoneration. Why is this different than American civil and criminal proceedings where the burden of proof is on the accusing party rather than on the accused?
No, that's not a fair representation of what happens in an investigation.
Then explain it to me.
So when a complaint comes in and the Integrity Committee determines that it is opening a case, it generally refers the complaint to the subject or subjects plural and says, here are the allegations.
Refute them.
You have an opportunity to refute them.
And the burden of proof is that they have to prove that the allegation is such that no reasonable person would conclude that further development would demonstrate that the respondent committed the misconduct. Isn't that the standard?
I believe that sounds accurate, but
Okay.
the whole point is that it doesn't, the Integrity Committee wouldn't have to do that step at all. That's a courtesy. That's an extra step.
I would tend to disagree with
Well,
that,
you can disagree, but
representation.
you can disagree, but that's an extra step that they add to help the subjects. So it's not
Placing the burden of proof on them.
It's being perverted. This is like looking through a funhouse mirror. This is not an accurate portrayal of what's actually happening in the process. This is an opportunity for the subjects, and the Integrity Committee over and over again takes those responses
So in
and
other
actually
words, what
kills
you're saying.
complaints. Let me finish my answer. Kills complaints and
Excuse
doesn't
me?
get to investigations.
Excuse me?
I'm trying to finish my answer.
I'm going to reclaim my time and ask the questions.
Our witness needs to understand that the gentlewoman controls the time, and I do recognize that you would like the opportunity to respond accordingly. I'm sure that the gentlewoman would give you that opportunity. She controls the time, and I would remind the witness we appreciate him being here, but this is a hearing that the members that are waived on will control their own time, sir. Does the gentleman understand that?
Yes, sir.
Thank you very much. Gentlewoman's recognized.
Let's move on to a different subject here then. When the IC pursues an investigation against an IG or an employee of the IG office, it does so against them in their personal capacity. Is that correct? Even though the allegations relate to official acts?
It is investigating the individual as opposed to the organization.
So it is against them in their personal capacity, correct?
It is not investigating them in their personal capacity like if it were, say, a driving incident.
Well, let me ask it
related
this
to their
way.
work.
Are they able to access agency documentation that may support their claim of innocence?
I would imagine so.
Do you know one way or the other?
No, but I would imagine they can get materials in their work environment.
In its policies and procedures, the IC states that it may, quote, consider wrongdoing alleged to have occurred while an individual served as a covered person, even if that individual is no longer a covered person or in government service when the IC receives the allegation, end quote. Is the authority to investigate federal employees who are no longer in IG service or retired persons derived from statute, or is that an internal rule?
I don't know the answer to that.
Okay. If current IGs and IG employees find it difficult to meet the IC standard, how could it be even remotely possible for a former employee to resolve allegations against them, especially if they're not able to access documents from the agency?
As part of the investigation, I would imagine that the Integrity Committee would go to the agency the OIG in question to get relevant materials.
But the individual wouldn't have access to that information.
I don't know the answer to that.
Okay.
I would say that IGs regularly go after investigations involving former employees, because otherwise you set up a situation where folks will just resign and escape accountability, which is an outcome that none of us would want.
I think what we've uncovered is that there are very serious due process problems and constitutional and statutory problems associated with the ICs and the way that SIGI is set up and operated. That's the purpose of this hearing, is to get to the bottom of that. That's why I waved onto this committee, because I have very serious concerns about the due process rights and the process that is being followed. So we will follow up with this, with potentially with additional questions, but we will also continue to work with this committee to make sure that we can protect the due process rights and the rights of the people being investigated. Thank you, and with that, I yield back.
Mr. Chairman, I have a unanimous consent request.
If the gentleman wait just one moment,
Yeah.
please, and I will, as I told you, I will entertain that. I want to thank the gentlewoman for taking time. This is the correct hearing. You have done the right thing. And I would also say that that Mr. Greenblatt has showed up with, has available to him, other members of his staff that are listening to this, and we would expect to get each of your questions answered. I believe you've done the right thing, and I want to thank the gentlewoman for being here. If I could move to the distinguished gentleman from Virginia for the purpose of making it.
I thank the chair. Just, I'd like to insert in the record article from the Washington Post dated May 2nd, 2020, confirming what I said to Mr. Goldblatt, that Ms. Christy Grimm was indeed replaced by President Trump, and according to the article, because she found, quote, severe shortages in hospitals combating coronavirus.
The objection will include.
I thank the chair.
Yes, sir. We would now move to the distinguished gentlewoman from Pennsylvania. Ms. Lee is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. In 2020, President Trump's last year in office, he removed or replaced 5 inspectors general on what appeared to be retaliation for investigating the misconduct of his own administration. And in June 2020, the Government Accountability Office issued a report addressing the impact of political retaliation on IGs. That report said, quote, ensuring the independence of IGs is critical to OIG's credibility and effectiveness. I asked the chair for unanimous consent to enter the GAO report titled Inspectors General, Independence Principles and Considerations for Reform.
Without objection.
Thank you. Mr. Greenblatt, if there is the appearance of political interference with an Inspector General's office, how might that affect the mission and effectiveness of that office?
Certainly, independence is core to what we do. It's a central principle for all of us. We need to be independent from the agencies, and we report directly to our agency head, but also Congress as well, on a bipartisan basis, and that independence is absolutely critical for everything we do.
Thank you. President Trump also left gaping holes in the IG community for years at a time. While vacancies have been a problem in previous administrations, they were particularly damaging under Trump. During his tenure, 5 IG positions remained vacant for the entirety of his presidency. In contrast, President Biden and the Senate have confirmed 15 IG nominees. Inspector generals speak truth to power, and they rebuild trust in our government. Without qualified people to fill these essential oversight roles, we can't hold government leaders accountable. With that great responsibility comes a requirement that the IGs themselves remain above reproach. SIGI's Integrity Committee serves as the watchdog of our federal watchdogs. SIGI conducts nonpartisan investigations into allegations of legal and ethical wrongdoing by federal IGs and high-ranking OIG officials. They make recommendations for disciplinary action, up to recommending an IG's removal if their investigations confirm allegations of misconduct. The decision to remove an IG must be made outside of the political arena and not by a president who fears that an IG's findings will embarrass them or their political appointees. And we need these determinations in a timely manner. The Department of Homeland Security's Office of Inspector General's chief counsel admitted in a June 24, 2024 court filing that the Integrity Committee recommended disciplinary action against him. Yet nearly a month later, in a years-long investigation, the Integrity Committee has still not released a report to Congress. Mr. Greenblatt, can you give us an update on when that report will be released?
Well, as I said earlier, I'm not on the Integrity Committee. I don't participate in their deliberations or vote. I don't go to their meetings. So I don't know when that will be. I know it is a priority for the Integrity Committee. This is something everyone wants to move forward with, but it takes time. It is very large and multifaceted, and these things just take a long time, and it does not help. Well, these are very weighty issues, and I know the Integrity Committee is doing its best to move things forward in a deliberate fashion.
And I apologize if I'm asking you a question that's outside of your purview in fear of doing that, but what do you believe is, or what are you all doing to improve the speed of how quickly a report will be released, if you can answer that?
So we've already convened a working group to look at timeliness issues with respect to the Integrity Committee. That is something that is underway. We have asked them to move forward in an expeditious manner to try to develop some ideas on how we can move the Integrity Committee investigations forward faster. A major component of that is IG cooperation, and so that is perhaps the biggest problem with slower investigations is IG cooperation. So that is the hardest nut to crack is that issue.
Thank you. SIGGI's Integrity Committee serves an important purpose in holding our government accountable, but it must improve the timeliness of its investigations, or bad actors will be able to act with impunity. I asked you, Mr. Greenblatt, to release, or of course help to release the critical reports so leaders and policymakers know whether they can trust the people who hold these essential positions. I thank you for your time in the committees, and I yield back.
Thank you very much. Gentlewoman yields back his time. The distinguished gentleman from Georgia is recognized.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chairman, and Mr. Mifumi for agreeing to waive me on to today's hearing. Thank you, Mr. Greenblatt, for being here. I serve as the chairman of the Committee on House Administration Subcommittee on Oversight, and as you may be aware, I'm leading an in-depth investigation to the security failures of the Capitol on January 6th, and I'm keenly interested in discussing opportunities for improved coordination between SIGGI and Congress. I think you mentioned that earlier. As you can imagine, this investigation has caused me to try to work with several inspector generals in different agencies. And as you know, that SIGGI was established as an independent entity to address integrity and effectiveness issues. Unfortunately, I've heard from numerous stakeholders who say that SIGGI is anything but that. I have also significant concerns with SIGGI's Integrity Committee's lack of transparency and accountability, but I'll submit those questions for the record instead of trying to deal with all those right now, but I would appreciate prompt answers on those. Let me get on to the issues that I think are most prevalent right now. Following the events on January 6th, the Department of Homeland Security Office of Inspector General opened 3 different investigations. One regarding DHS intelligence failures, a second focusing on the Secret Service, and a third regarding DHS law enforcement response. 4 years later, we're coming up on 4 years, only one of those reports have been published, and that's the one on DHS intelligence failures. On January 6, 2021, Vice President-elect Kamala Harris drove within feet of an explosive device that the Secret Service had missed in a security sweep twice, and this was over at the DCCC. So we're very interested in the report, the IG report on Secret Service, that there was some level of failure in Secret Service that day, which was important to our investigation. Now, thank goodness it didn't go off. The bomb didn't go off. But then we have this incident on July 13th this year of the attempted assassination of President Trump that reminds us that if we have issues or incompetence within an organization, it's imperative that we look into it and correct it, or it may happen again. So I'm not suggesting that there is a connection, but this goes all the way back January 6th, that there were some issues with the Secret Service. Now, my subcommittee became aware that the reason we have not gotten the report on Secret Service or the other report is that Secretary Mayorkas is himself delaying these reports that directly relate to our ongoing investigation. In addition, my subcommittee has discovered numerous significant issues in a DOD IG report that focused on the delayed deployment of the D.C. National Guard to the Capitol on January 6. One of the issues that we found out is that there were some inaccuracies in their report, and my subcommittee staff reached out to SIGI with concerns about the IG report and the DOD IG report, and my staff simply asked SIGI for a briefing on the historical context of an IG report being retracted or revised. We wanted a briefing from your organization on, can an IG retract or revise a report? However, SIGI forwarded that email over to the very entity, the DOD IG. I found that to be inappropriate, and in fact, the DOD IG said that was inappropriate. We're asking SIGI to help us with something, but SIGI then forwards our request to the very entity that we're looking into. I have some issues with that. So question, how can SIGI be an independent entity entrusted with addressing integrity issues in the offices of Inspector General if they're differential to the OIG that they are tasked with overseeing?
Sir, I find that unfortunate that if there was miscommunication, I take responsibility for that. I don't remember the specific incident, but I take responsibility for it. SIGI is under my leadership. We at SIGI, the council, we don't want to step on the toes of the individual IGs and their relationship with Congress. So sometimes we get incoming from Congress about specific members, and we don't, it would be inappropriate for us to weigh in. So sometimes we do defer to the individual IGs. In this case, if that was, we perhaps should have come to you first.
Well, I think so, instead of letting the IG know that we're looking into them. Since we're running late, let me move on to a couple other questions. I think it'll be easier for you to answer. If an IG releases a report and later is determined that there are significant factual errors, what should be done, and should that report be retracted or corrected?
I've seen that in the past, sir, and we try to get it right. The answer, we try to get the right answer, and if we get it wrong, I think it would be wholly appropriate to take down whatever is wrong and replace it with something that is factually accurate. We don't want incorrect information.
And let me just lay out a hypothetical. If somebody testified and gave you wrong information that turned out later that they were not giving you the right information. So, according to the Inspector General Act, are Inspector Generals entitled to any and all information from the agency they oversee?
Yes, sir.
Okay, thank you. Is there a law that prohibits an Inspector General from sharing a completed report with Congress if that report has already been shared with the agency for technical input? Is there a law that prohibits an IG from sharing
if it's
a report with Congress once it's already been shared for technical input with the agency?
So the process, just in general terms, so we split up audits, inspections, and evaluations on the one hand and investigations on the other hand. So let's put investigations to the side. But audits, inspection, and evaluation, typically speaking, the process is that it goes to the agency for their comment and draft.
Right.
They respond, then we incorporate those comments and deal with those comments in some way. And then when it goes to final, we give it to the agency, but we also give it to Congress and put it online. Right. So I would say at the final stage, then certainly that should be, that's a matter of standard practice. But in the draft stage, no, I don't think that's standard because we want to get the comments back from the department.
So if the comments have come back, and I mean, we're talking about reports that have been going on for 4 years.
No, I understand.
Yeah, so I think you've answered that appropriately. Is it appropriate for an agency secretary to threaten to withhold information from an IG if they provide a report to Congress without the Secretary's approval?
Oh, I don't think that's appropriate.
Would you say that it's illegal?
I don't know the answer to that, and I hesitate to
Okay.
wade into a situation.
Well, thank you.
that I don't know.
This is something that we're dealing with, is a secretary telling the IG if they release a report to Congress, they won't have access to any future information. I have a big problem with that.
I can't speak to a single specific situation, but that I would, in hypothetical situations, I would not support that.
Okay, because that is exactly what we're getting from the DHS IG, is that they can't release this report because Secretary Mayorkas is refusing to give them access to future information. So, Mr. Chairman, I've got some other questions that I can submit for the record. I know that I just heard the bell, so I think they're calling votes, and with that, I'll yield back.
In fact, the gentleman's correct, and I would respect and appreciate that and would welcome those to be given. And the distinguished gentleman would also take those on. And so we will, at the end of the hearing, notify members that within 5 days, we would expect to hear back from that. Thank you very
Mr.
much. Mr. Bell, would you like to be recognized? Mr. Frost, would you like to be recognized? Oh, Ms. Tlaib, I apologize.
That's okay, Mr.
Gentlewoman's
Chair.
recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Greenbelt, thank you so much for being here. I want to ask you about PACE, which I think is, what does it stand for? Pandemic Analytics Center of Excellence?
Yes.
What is it?
It is a data analytics center that we have on the pandemic side. So this deals with PPP loans and.
So you seed out fraud?
I'm sorry.
To look at fraud?
Correct.
Okay.
Correct.
In over 4 years, with the $40 million investment from Congress, the PACE provided investigative support for more than 40 federal law enforcement and OIG partners, of course, on more than, 875 pandemic-related investigations?
Yeah, it's a huge number, yes.
Yeah, 19,000 subjects, estimated fraud loss of, 2.1 billion, is that
Yes.
correct?
Yes.
So, Mr. Greenbelt, why is PACE only for pandemic-related?
That's the $64,000 question. We would love to
Yeah.
expand that
That's what I wanted.
and implement that government-wide at SIGI. And then we can not only look at money that has gone out the door, but we can look at on a preventative basis and give information to the agencies in advance.
So applying PACE to all the various federal programs across the board would result in the same kind of, findings of fraud and be able to try to save money for the American people?
Yeah, and more than that, I think it would be preventative. What the numbers you were sharing before were solely after the money's gone out the door.
Yep.
We would like to establish such a data hub to prevent those bad dollars going out the door.
The one question so how does PACE, though, how does it share data and information with agencies and states and local government in ways that protect sensitive information, like folks' Social Security numbers and personal ID information?
Yeah, we're very conscious of PII, Social Security numbers and things along those lines. But that's, so for example, if the PACE had been in existence in 2020, it could have taken the Social Security numbers that the Small Business Administration was going to give loans to, PPP loans, back in 2020. And running those numbers, it found 70,000 Social Security numbers that were questionable. And it could have sent those to the Social Security the Small Business Administration in a secure fashion to identify more than $5.4 billion.
Is that because of identity theft?
It could have been identity theft. It's possible. It could be dead people. It could be identity theft.
Sure.
It could be a whole wide variety of different issues. But yes, identity theft would be.
I know our ranking member on this committee has a bill to basically, isn't it like expiring or something? Is that correct?
That's right. The
PACE
is
program, yeah.
The Pandemic Response Accountability Committee, the PRAC, which houses the PACE, is supposed to expire at the end of 2020, fiscal year 2025. Which means the PACE would evaporate. And so we are trying to extend it and keep the PACE.
Mr. Greenbelt, give me an example of what PACE found. I know it's details, but just if I was to go back to my district and say, hey, guess what, PACE is great, we should continue it, look what it found.
Oh, it's looking at everything from unemployment insurance to, like I said, the PPP loans. It's looking at federal employees who are getting PPP loans, even though they were gainfully employed with the federal government.
How about members of Congress?
I don't know the answer to that.
No, some of them did get it.
Yeah,
like-
I don't know the answer to that, actually.
But Pace would look at that, right?
Theoretically, it could.
Yeah.
I don't know if they have. That's a good question.
You probably should.
Yeah,
Yeah.
possibly. I'm going to demur on that. At
No,
this
I mean,
particular
fraud is rampant. It's not just, you know, obviously in the public sector, but even in the private sector. And just to do data analytics like this and to use the technology we have now to kind of have better oversight, I mean, that could save, like I said, already saves billions.
Absolutely. One of the things we found we did at the Department of the Interior, we looked at the federal employees who were also getting, I'm talking about at the
Yeah.
department, who were also getting PPP loans, you know, presumably inappropriately.
Yeah.
And we found that the vast majority of them were identity theft.
Yeah.
They were not actually the employees.
That's what we found in unemployment in Michigan.
Right.
A lot of identity theft.
The potential for fraud in those programs is enormous.
Yeah.
And what we could do with a data center would be, I think, comparably enormous to prevent that fraud. And with a very small investment of
Yeah.
cash, relatively speaking, we're talking about pennies. And if we talk about the expired funds, which I raised at the very beginning,
Yeah.
unobligated expired funds, you know, from the IGs going to say, we could fund this very quickly. I think this is a game changer, an absolute game changer for the oversight community.
Well, thank you so much, Mr. Greenbelt. I yield, Mr. Chair.
Gentlewoman yields back her time. I would like to ask, I'm giving myself unanimous consent, but would ask unanimous consent to enter to the record a letter to President Biden signed by Chairman Comer asking for President Biden to fill vacant IG positions. This letter describes how positions such as the Treasury have been vacant for over 1,000 days under the Biden administration. So with that objection, we'll enter that into the record. Mr. Frost, you're recognized.
Thank you so much, Mr. Chair. SIGI and the Integrity Committee are essential to federal government operations and trust in our institutions. Without their work, Inspector General misconduct could go unaddressed. Inspectors General are experts and professionals at uncovering misconduct, fraud, waste, and abuse. Mr. Greenblatt, how does the Integrity Committee help ensure that Inspectors General are both transparent and accountable?
So it is the investigatory body that Congress has created to, you know, like I said, investigate allegations of misconduct by IGs and senior folks and a handful of other folks in government, like the special counsel. And it is, one of the things I'd like to say, we had allegations about due process and transparency. The Integrity Committee has a number of mechanisms that ensure fairness, that ensure a fair process, and far more transparency than any other investigatory body I can think of. And they have regular updates to Congress, and we have extensive reporting requirements that are far beyond anything we do in our actual day-to-day jobs as IGs. And so I think Congress should be very confident that the Integrity Committee is acting in good faith. There are a number of very long investigations that have bedeviled the Integrity Committee. I will not shy away from that. I see you shaking your head. That is something we don't disagree on that. That is a significant issue. How we address that issue, we have some ideas. But it is robust and it is designed to get to a fair answer. It is not, it's not a hammer looking for nails. Quite the opposite. It is trying to operate in a fair environment. And it is remarkably, the processes and procedures, I think, are remarkably fair. And I'm concerned that some of the perceptions about the process are simply not accurate and don't fairly reflect the process. And I'm happy to sit with any member at any time and discuss those issues, as we did, Mr. Chairman, yesterday.
Thank you. I appreciate it. In recent years, we've seen the type of IG misconduct that clearly demonstrates the need for the Integrity Committee. In June of 2021, for example, the Federal Housing and Finance Agency IG, Laura Wettheimer, resigned after the Integrity Committee found that she fostered, and I quote, a culture of witness intimidation through a pattern of staff abuse and fear of retaliation, end quote. In mid-2022, following an investigation by SIGI, the Inspector General for the Securities and Exchange Commission, Carl Heckler, resigned following reports that he refused to act on credible allegations of sexual harassment. Mr. Greenblatt, as an Inspector General yourself, can you briefly describe the kinds of recoveries and enforcement action supported by IG investigations and give us a general idea of the dollar amounts that you've had to deal with?
In the IG community writ large,
Yes.
We have had remarkable success. As I mentioned earlier, we had $693 billion in either question cost or recoveries from OIG and oversight efforts over the past 10 years. It's a remarkable, I think last year alone we had $93 billion. That's just 1 year. If you add up all of the IG budgets, and roll them up and compare that with the $93 billion, it's something like a 26-to-1. So for every dollar appropriated to an OIG, we are turning back $26 in potential savings. So this is serious return on investment, and that doesn't include the variety of investigations and audits and inspections that don't include monetary returns. Like I said, the work on preventing suicides, veteran suicides, the work on protecting nursing home, the elderly in nursing homes, protecting tenants in public housing if you're from sexual predators. Those don't have a dollar figure associated with them. So just looking at the financial return on investment, it's 26-to-1 dollar, but that omits an enormous amount of what we do on a day-to-day basis.
Thank you so much. I appreciate you being here. I think the clock was frozen for a little bit, so I had some extra time. I'll just put that in the bank for next time.
I was thinking the same thing. I didn't get a chance to ask questions either. Thank you very much.
Of course, I yield back.
Look, we're on a closing time. We all know that. I want to thank you for taking time. You've done well enough to be invited back. In closing, I want to thank you for your forthrightness. I also want you to know that Mr. Mfume would like to have the mic to express himself. Gentleman's recognized.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just want to echo your comments, Mr. Greenblatt. Thank you for being forthright. As you heard, there is some interest here in pursuing this notion of expired funds to be able to properly fund the operation that you have, and I think that there were a number of members here that raised some fine points. So just when we thought this was going to be a very nice and calm hearing, it goes to show you that people feel strongly about this. And I hope that if the chairman is willing, maybe we can have you back again. I don't want to think that this is the end of it.
The gentleman would be correct. We try and work together and see the same thing. But I think a number of members, as I told you yesterday, have expressed ideas. Okay, with that, without objection, all members have 5 legislative days within to submit materials and additional written questions for the witness, which will be forwarded to the witnesses from the subcommittee. If there's any further business, I see none. Without objection, the subcommittee stands adjourned. Thank you very much.